Hello and welcome to episode 83 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Lisa Bodell, a globally recognized expert on innovation and simplicity, and the founder and CEO of FutureThink. With over 2 decades of experience, Lisa has dedicated her career to helping organizations embrace change and eliminate complexity to unlock their full potential. She has worked with industry-leading brands and is the author of best-selling books like Kill the Company and Why Simple Wins. Get ready for actionable tips, inspiring stories, and insights you can use right away. Let's dive in. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Scott.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Before we get too far into it, if you could just tell the listeners a little bit about you, your career journey, and the fascinating work that you're doing today.
Sure. Well, I mean, so much of what I've done, I feel like I like to package as strategic luck. A lot of it I had no intention of doing, but here I am. I've always been a very good teacher and communicator. And I actually thought I was going to be a social worker. And I got out of school because I also have I want to give back to people. So I went into social work for a little bit and then I realized that was not for me. I also liked to be very entrepreneurial and I started my own business. So my intention was to actually teach people how to be creative. And it was very interesting to me as I got started over 20 years ago, how that evolved. It started with training people one-on-one, kind of consulting. And then it evolved into coaching and formal training with trainers. And then someone approached me and said, why haven't you written a book? And I said, why would I want to write a book? Books are for people with egos. And most people write a book and it's for them. I said, I'm in it for others. And they said, just write a book. And then that launched my speaking career and that really changed my life. So I spent a lot of my time, I enjoy it so much, speaking and helping others by doing that. And then my training and my trainers reinforce it. So I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, and I'm an author.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. And I see a lot of similarity just with my background as starting my career as a teacher. Always felt that I was good with coaching and helping people, and I wanted to really help people grow. And I did it for a few years and realized, okay, I don't think this is the gold watch career for me. I don't know that I'm gonna be able to teach high school for 30 years. Bless folks who do that. It just, for me, I realized I wasn't quite going to be able to do that, but I wanted to stay in this area of helping people achieve their goals, helping them grow, and doing it through education and training. So really cool to hear that. And I love this idea of teaching creativity because it's one of those things where I think where a lot of people hear that and like, oh, he's just creative, he's naturally gifted. And for me, that it's absolutely a skill that can be taught. So it's really cool to talk to folks that are working with others to teach the skill, because it's a critical part, I think, of not only success in personal life, but really in that professional life when it comes to all aspects of business. And I think communication is a big part of that. And I'm sure we'll talk about it today.
Yeah, 100%.
So as you hear people talk about communication skills, and especially with your experience doing a lot of keynote speaking and working with your clients and your organizations, whether it's doing team coaching or one-on-one coaching, you probably have seen a lot of really good communicators, maybe not so much. But when
a mixed bag.
When you hear that term that somebody is a great communicator, what's the image that comes to mind for you?
Well, first is a feeling, right? I think a really great communicator gets their point across in a way that I can understand it and I can do something with it, like it resonates, right? To me, the style can range greatly, but I feel, in my opinion, the best communicators are the ones who have a simple message, who are authentic, who can tell stories, either personal or others, to prove their message, right? And are inspiring, but they don't need to be inspiring in a fiery way. It can also be a quiet way. So I think that to me is a good presenter, right? They not just what they get across, but how I feel at the end of it. I think too many people, when they try and speak or communicate, they feel like they have to be this caricature, right? They have to be over the top or way over energetic and extroverted. And people can tell when you're not being you. And so, that to me is I always look for the people that are genuinely authentic. They even might be self-deprecating. To me, those are the people that really resonate with me most, and I'm more apt to listen to their message.
It really struck me when you said that a great communicator, the first thing that comes to you is a feeling. And I completely agree with that. When you, whether it's one-on-one or you see somebody on a stage delivering a keynote, usually there is some sort of emotional connection almost immediately, whether it's from the greeting, the way that they walk out, how they open the conversation or open their speech. There is some sort of connection there. And this idea of authenticity is so important. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought it up. Similar to what we just talked about a little bit with creativity, where people think, okay, people are just creative. People are naturally gifted speakers. I just need to try and emulate that. And that's where you get so many speakers that are just way over the top. And you can tell
Yeah.
they're not comfortable with it. They're stepping too far outside of their comfort zone or too far outside of who they are. I think you have to maybe stretch a little bit depending on your audience and your venue. But yeah, if you're not true to yourself, it's going to come across. And then the third thing that really jumped out there, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this today, is this simplicity.
Mm.
Oh, coming out of a teaching background when it comes to communication, especially we see this a lot with written communication, then going into colleges with how people are trained to communicate and trained to write. There is a disconnect when people get into the corporate world with how to communication. That simplicity is lost, and people are sometimes, I think, speaking for the sake of speaking, being overly verbose in their writing, so to speak. Or you're getting dissertations, and people are just getting lost in it. I think you lose your voice when you do that, and you definitely lose your audience.
Yeah, simplicity is very core to not just, people think of simplicity in terms of processes or organizing. And being organized isn't being simplified. So when you talk about communicating, to your point is I can organize a very large speech. That doesn't mean it's a good speech, right? Less is better. Like getting it to what is the real meaning, the real core, and how it resonates with you. So I think simplicity is core. You said another thing, which is a lot of kids are not prepared when they get out into the real world. And I think there's a problem with that because we underestimate the power of, what you and I would call soft skills or power skills
Mhm.
today. We are very good in education at teaching the hard subject matter expert, uh, categories, history, science, STEM related things, but we underestimate the human skills, right? So the things that really matter in business, frankly, and get you ahead in life. So, I wish more people would be taught in school so they'd be prepared and work to be better communicators, better debaters, presenters, right? They'd be more agile. They'd be creative thinkers, critical problem solvers. Those things are very important, and we don't teach them. So I understand why businesses are frustrated, but the problem is in schools right now is we are teaching kids to be, we're raising employees, and we should be raising
Mhm.
humans, and that's different. So, going back to communicating, I wish my bias, because that's part of my job and training, et cetera, is that more kids would have to present because it would teach them to communicate and get their point across better.
Spot on. Spot on. Yeah, I was so happy when my son, who's in 10th grade now, so last year's freshman year in high school, was taking a public speaking class. I was
Oh
just
God,
and I
I
think
think it should be required and in
yes,
college too, by the way.
yes, absolutely. And I think I probably drove him crazy a little bit with like, hey, what are you doing here? Hey, remember this, do this. And I was like, don't make me look bad, okay? You know what I do for a
Right.
living, so don't make me
Right.
look bad. And then a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to go into my daughter's fourth grade class. So they brought parents in to watch some presentations, and I'm just sitting there like, it was driving me bonkers to not like try to correct some of these behaviors in these kids. And so the teachers found out what I do for work, and so they asked me to come in to prepare the students for
Yeah.
the next round of this. So this is 9-year olds, 9, 10-year olds, and when I say these skills can be taught, they can absolutely be taught. There's nothing really earth shattering about it. It's about learning the particular skills and then obviously practicing them. And so I spent, 30, 45 minutes with, I think they combined two classes. So 49 and 10-year olds, and they were just boom, getting it skill after skill. And they were eager to come up and practice in front of the class, which I
Well,
found mind blowing that they wanted to get up and do it.
I think so. Maybe because they're young. I don't
Yeah.
know. Because most people, when they get older, they don't want anything to do with it. And that's a problem because,
Yeah.
right. So like make a little junior Toastmasters or something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, Lisa, as you are out there working with organizations today, we just hit on, right? There's definitely a skills gap on those soft skills, power skills, 21st
Yeah.
century skills, people skills, whatever you want to call them. There's definitely a gap there. So as you're going out and working with organizations, what are you seeing really are some of those key critical communication skills that employees and teams and leaders are needing to really thrive in today's workforce?
Getting to the point. I think, and it's email. I mean, yeah, in text you're okay, and in Slack you're okay. People just kind of get to the point. Well, I shouldn't say ever. There are some people that write text like emails. You know what I mean? Um, I think there's a common phrase actually that's used in the military that I try and teach in corporations, which is called bluff, right? Bottom line up front. And we'd be so much better off if people could just figure out what their bluff is before they communicate, because then their emails would be shorter. So that's a really good trick. The other thing, believe it or not, we're trying to teach people in terms of communication is even using ChatGPT for their communications. Put it through it and tell me what my bluff is. And it's interesting to see how ChatGPT interprets it, because then you know how the reader is going to interpret it. So that's something interesting to do. I think something that people would be really good at doing is cutting things in half. I don't know how else to say it, but my bias is simplification. So putting everything through the filter of getting to the point, I think would be a major thing for people. The other thing I think is we've lost the art of how to communicate with people in a way that is personal. And in a world where we are remote work, and I think that's a good thing,
Mhm.
it's a lot harder. Everything becomes very time boxed and transactional. And I think it would be a lot better for people to be able to practice doing some in-person communications so they can get the kind of human and emotional side back into it. I think that's missing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love the tip about running it through the chat GPT and asking it for, what's my bluff? What's my key message there? And one of the things I always do if I have an important message, whether it's a sales message going to a client or just something internally, I send it to myself and I'll pull it up on my phone. And if I have to kind of scroll with my thumb more than twice, to me, the message is too long. I go back and I try to simplify it, try to cut it down a little bit because so many people are reading their messages on their phones today. So if you're having to do that, people aren't going to get through it. They'll give up on it before they even
Yeah.
get to your key message.
Well, we call it no scroll emails, right? If you have to scroll, it should have been an attachment. So there's something about brevity for
Mm-hmm.
sure. There's something about getting to the point because you show that you are focused and you value people's time. And there's also something clear about it's not just what the email is about, but or the communication, but what are you asking of them? So you mentioned something really interesting, which is people get up and they ramble and they don't really have a point. And what is it that you want to get across, and what are you asking the audience to do? So if I'm sending you an email, let's just be that direct in terms
Mm-hmm.
of business. What am I asking you? Like, am I just giving you my opinion? People don't have time for that. Am I just giving you, I don't know, something to read? I think we really got to get clear about what our ask is as well, especially when time is the most precious resource people have. How can we help them use it
Yeah.
better?
And if I think about that, the way that I structure messages, if I'm say, sending something off to our CEO and owner of the organization, maybe to make an investment in the business, right? Hey, our CRM system is outdated. We need to switch to this new organization, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of my core message right there. I need your approval for X, Y, and Z. That's my ask of him. So if he's ready to go and prepared, he can immediately stop reading and say, yep, you are good to go. But then below that, I might provide some additional details. And at the end, hey, attached for your reference is this if you're interested into maybe a product comparison or a cost comparison, whatever. So the goal is very quickly, the person should know what's my key message? What do you need from me? Everything
Mhm.
else really should be optional for them. And when
I
you
agree.
structure it that way, you can send that same message to multiple people. And some people really only care about the message. Some people care about the action item. Then there's other people that it's important maybe to their particular job where they are going to dig into the details. They are going to read that attachment.
Yeah, you know what you're making me think of is I think that's really helpful to teach kids in terms of structure, right? It's kind of like
Mhm.
how do you write an essay? How do you, different arcs to stories. But I think with communications, that's true too. Like how do you write a letter? How do you write an email? Right? We used to
Mhm.
teach letter writing. Why aren't we teaching email writing? Business communications. So I think there's a formula to that. And I'm going to tell you the pitfall though. And I think there's the same thing with presenting, right? There's tell them what if you're going to tell them what you told, that kind of thing. The problem is that people get into a formulaic approach, right? And sometimes it gets overused, and then sometimes even the message gets lost. I'm thinking of TED Talks when I talk to you right now, which
Mhm.
is TED Talks used to be great.
Yeah.
Now I think they suck. And the reason why is because everyone feels that they have to come out with some like dramatic opening, and they're very uncomfortable. They're horrible presenters. So this trying to be a TED Talk speaker when they're not,
Yeah.
it comes off as really bad, trying to be very dramatic and making a story that isn't really a story, and then wrapping up to some crescendo that isn't a crescendo. So
Yeah.
what I'm trying to tell you is, I think we try to emulate certain formulas, but not every form. How do you make that formula then your own so it's authentic is what I'm getting back to. So we can be the teachers, but then we've also got to coach people of how do you make it yourself.
Spot on. And the old expression, right? When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So
That's
sometimes when
right.
people get a new skill, they want to apply it to everything. And not every presentation, as you mentioned, needs to be a TED Talk. Not every email you send need, some of them are just need to be very simple. Yes, go do this, or here's why I don't agree. So having I don't know, maybe it's the emotional intelligence or the sense and savvy to know, here's how I take these tools, and here are the situations where I need to apply this, or here's a framework or style or structure or approach that's going to work for this scenario.
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah. And so that's part of the challenge too, is like, how do you can give people formulas, but I think there's something in that. I guess the way to say it is teaching the formula is one thing, but the coaching and the practice is another. And we are very good. This is especially in the United States, right? We are very good at giving people the formula,
Mm-hmm.
but we lack the patience and the time to coach people and practice it, right? So there's the learning, but the apprenticeship part of it. The same thing in business,
Yeah.
right? It's like going to a training, you know this, and then no one has the time or patience to practice it and recalibrate. They just got to go do it.
Yeah.
And so something gets lost in that apprenticeship and that the practicing, I think, for people. Everything sounds
You're
good in
speaking to the
theory.
choir. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we get the client request for, can we get this 2 day training? Can we do it in 4 hours and put like 80 people in there? It's
Yeah,
like,
I know. I don't know
well,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
right. I mean, you could, but you're not going to get anything out of it,
And I
right?
want everyone to be able to interact and have a
Yes.
chance to be experiential.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we live the same pain. So
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So that's a challenge too. But that's what you're getting at is interesting, which is I think people when they do want the experiential, they do want the interactive, they do want to practice and know that they're not alone. Like it kind of like presenting, right? You and I do
mhm,
this all the time, is no one as an adult typically wants to get up and present. But if they all know they're in the same boat and there's time, they
mhm,
feel more relaxed. But when you only have one shot and one chance and it's really stressful, it's you're not as willing to take chances
mhm.
and practice at things. So
Yeah,
time is actually one of our biggest issues, I think.
absolutely. Lisa, shifting gears a little bit. If
Mm,
you think about your career and the success that you've had running your training organization,
mm.
very well-known, in-demand keynote speaker, if you had to boil it down to one, maybe two key communication skills that really have got you to where you are today, what do you think that would be?
I do think authenticity. Like I am very self-deprecating. I am very authentic. I really what you see is what you get with me, right? You
Mhm,
get on stage and I'm not trying to be somebody else or over the top. So I think that's a big part of it. For me, it's humor. And so when I get on stage, like I have a lot of jokes because I think people learn by what stories, right?
mhm,
But they also learn by enjoying it, right? And I think part of it you have to make fun of yourself. Like
mhm,
that's why that's what makes good comedy. The reason the people at Second City and SNL, and I employ a lot of those freelancers in my company.
mhm.
And because they're improv, they're on their feet, but they're self-deprecating, right? If you can't take a joke, you can't make a joke.
Yeah.
And so I think that humor is a very important part of my style, my brand, my company's brand. And I think it disarms people and allows them to learn better.
Yeah, I think humor, and for me being a big comedy fan, I try to infuse
Uh,
humor when I can, whether it's with my
Great.
team or if I'm delivering a presentation or just in conversations. The thing that I always caution folks about when it comes to humor is that if that's not, once again, kind of back to authenticity, right? If you're not, I want to say humorous person, or if you don't have, not interested in comedy, or you don't make jokes a lot, once again, sometimes it does come off as a little inauthentic, or you run the risk of saying something inappropriate because you don't have a sense for the audience and what people may find humorous. So it's always that balancing act.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think everyone has the potential, everyone is funny in their own way.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like when people fall into the traps, in presenting, when someone always uses they used a quote, so and so once said, Einstein once said, Steve Jobs once said,
Mm-hmm.
you get the same old crutches.
Yeah.
And I think if you're going to use humor, again, it's got to be something that's authentic to you. So, and again, that can be difficult. You have to try different things. Just like everyone thinks that a comic, right, or a
Mm-hmm.
stand-up isn't funny with their jokes all the time. Do you know how many times they practice those jokes? Over. I mean, they go to those comedy clubs and they test their bits over and over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over, like just to get a word right. So very few people get it right on the first try.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast earlier today when I was out walking the dogs. It was Jim Gaffigan, and he's been doing this for
Oh,
30 plus years. And he was just
have you
talking
seen
about
Gaffigan? I
how
haven't seen his new bit, but his new special,
I
but it's
haven't
really
seen it
really
yet. So
good.
that's obviously what he's on all the
Yeah.
shows now promoting it. But I was just, and he was talking about early on in his career, he just had so many of those experiences where you get up there and it falls flat. But
Bombs,
sometimes
bombs.
changing a word, changing the timing, where you're looking, whatever you're doing makes an impact on that. So it takes the reps. For me, when it comes into communication skills, it's all about one, learning the right ways to do it, learning from your mistakes, and then getting those reps in, just like anything else. If it's a muscle, if it's a skill, golf, tennis, pickleball, public speaking, whatever, you're going to have to work at it in order to get better and to see improvements. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, learn from the mistakes.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So I mean, I think there's something to it. So when, you were asking me what my brand is, and humor is part of it, but like maybe someone else's brand will be something different, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's, I don't know, it's joy. I have no idea. But I think that's actually a really good point about a communicator is, I think thinking about what your communication style is, as much as the how you're going to communicate or the
Mm-hmm.
formula behind it. People don't think about their style. And that's interesting because then they don't realize how they come across.
Yeah, great segue to what I wanted to talk a little bit about next is communication style, because there really is no one effective communication style. If you think of some of the people that are known as great public speakers, say if you think of like a Tony Robbins versus a Simon Sinek, very different communication styles with how they come across on stage, but both very equally impactful and successful in what they do. So,
Mhm.
who's someone from throughout your career or throughout your life that has had an impact on your communication style?
I really liked Ken Robinson. And he's a friend. He endorsed my book, and I communicated with him. And he's since passed. But seeing his TED Talk, and I'm sure as an educator,
Mhm.
that had a profound impact on me as somebody who is an educator, but also wanted to get across a message that I think is important, and it resonated with me. But I thought his style was fantastic. Like if you watch his TED Talk, right? I would encourage anyone listening to this to do that because it's one of the most watched of all time, not just because of the message, but because of the presentation. And he was very authentic. He wasn't over the top, right? Like
Mhm.
a Tony Robbins. That's his style. Ken's is much more subtle, authentic, with a slight bit of humor attached to it. So that to me, that resonated
Mhm.
because of who I am. I am less in the Tony Robbins camp because I feel
Mhm.
he's great for what he does. That is not a style that resonates with me.
Mhm.
So I think finding your style is really important, and not to think that I think everyone thinks the Tony Robbins style is what you need to be.
Right.
And I can't disagree with that more. I think that is a big mistake. So finding your style and then finding those people that then you can emulate and watch, that would be a really good thing for people to do to role model.
Absolutely. And even if you are trying to go into, say, a motivational speaking type of route, you don't need to be that over the top, energetic halftime football coach. You can motivate and engage people, being very soft spoken and mild manner, as long as you are keeping your message simple, understanding your audience, and really crafting that message to how it's going to be received best by that particular audience. So, yeah, absolutely. And if I think about my teaching days, right, seeing different teachers and how every teacher had their own style of classroom management and delivery, and some were, very just hard nosed and strict. Some were very just kind of laissez faire with how they ran things. And some of them it worked, some of them it was a train wreck, but you start to develop your style, and you throughout your career, you pull things from other people. The thing that I was actually known for, I was extremely loud. One of my classroom strategies, I was just a loud talker when I presented. My family actually still jokes about my teacher voice, but to the point where the person teaching next to me said, "No, I don't even teach anymore. I just let the kids listen to you through the halls, because if we taught the same subject on the same pace." He's like, "Yeah, I sit at my desk, they just listen to you go." So
That's funny.
yeah, but yeah, actually, like I said, it is important to really understand when it comes to a style. Ultimately, it goes back to that authenticity, right? You have to focus on what's going to work for you and feel comfortable for you, because it's hard to, one, do that nonstop. It's exhausting when you go out there and try to be someone that you're not. You'll feel it. You will absolutely feel it. It feels
It'll be
forced, and it's
draining.
just going to drain you.
I think a good exercise for people, even accomplished speakers, because there are people that are, they're good speakers, but they could be great speakers if they just had the time to think. And I would encourage people, a lot of the questions that you're asking me is, who are your role models when you think of good communicators? And that can be teachers, that can be coaches, that can be people that are famous. And writing those down. What are the qualities about them? What are the qualities that you think you are good, like that you would want to have define you, right? And start to really say, and what would be the ways that you feel comfortable communicating that going forward? Is it through brief communications? Is it through, is it through stories? Is it through humor? Like, I have one guy on my team that he's incredibly introverted, but he really communicates and gets his point across. People thought he was terse because he was so short. And so he started including memes with every one of his communications. People love to get his emails now, because he realized like who he was. He's like, I'm not terse. That's not who I am at all. And so then he realized how he needed to change his communication to be perceived differently and get his message across. So that's a good thing.
The awareness, the self-awareness of that.
Yeah. Well, we don't have enough time to be self-aware. That would be a good thing for people to do.
Yes, absolutely. Lisa, as we are wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have for folks listening to this, really just in general, around the importance of the skills we talked about today and the impact it can have on their lives?
Communication is mostly about feelings. And I think that we focus a lot on what we're communicating, but I think it would be also really important to think about, as you're either writing or speaking, how you want people to feel. And if you kind of put yourself in the receiver's shoes, I think your communications will be much more impactful and well received.
Fantastic advice. And I think a lot of people would find that surprising to hear, that one of the best ways to improve your own communication skills is to focus less on yourself and more on the other person. But it's absolutely spot on when it comes to communication. And one of my prior guests said this very well. It's like 100% of everything that is said by the listener. So ultimately, you want to start to think about how they are going to receive it and how it's going to land on them as you are crafting your communications, whether it's an email or a big speech that you're giving. So
That's
Lisa,
100%.
thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
Thoroughly
you, Scott.
enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Special thanks again to my guest, Lisa Bodell. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Remember, great communication isn't just about what you say. It's about how it makes others feel. As we close this episode, remember that mastering communication is a continuous journey. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from conversations with future guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.